Welcome back to the Daily Mastermind. George Wright III here with your daily dose of inspiration, motivation, and education. So I hope you're having a great week. Today I wanted to kind of follow up on a conversation I had with you earlier in the week about a mastermind event I had the privilege of going to called the Arete Syndicate. And at that event, there were some amazing speakers, and one of those speakers was RobertGreen. He's I believe it's a 6-time bestseller, international best-selling author. He wrote the 48 Laws of Power, as well as several other books. He also wrote the 50th Law, which is the book he did with 50 Cent, the rapper. And pretty interesting background. He has an amazing background, but he has some great concepts and principles. And he talked about specifically reality and your perception and perspective of reality. And so I wanted to talk with you about a few notes I took on this subject and some ideas that might inspire you and help you to gain some perspective. And why is it so appropriate? Well, what is your definition of reality, right? Reality can be so many different things, but at the end of the day, reality is just your perception or perspective of how you see things. And it's really interesting right now with the world in so many, different chaotic states, that I think that focusing on what your reality and your perception is super, super important. So what I want to do is I want to give you an illustration that he did that I thought was a really good way to really analyze and look at reality. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a trip with me and just kind of imagine or visualize. You can close your eyes as long as you're not driving. But imagine with me that we're going on a little hike. And we're going on this little trip because we know that if we go through this beautiful meadow, we're going to find this cliff or this hill that we can have that has an amazing view. And you've heard about it. You've heard that this is the most amazing view, and you just can't wait to check it out. So you get up one day and it's gorgeous outside, and you start walking down this path. And you're walking down the path, and you kind of hear the birds, chirping and the sun shining. It's definitely a warm day out. And all of a sudden, you come to this creek. And this creek is kind of an obstacle in the way between you and the meadow, the hill you're looking for. In fact, you can see it in the distance. And you come to this creek, and all of a sudden, you're faced with a choice. And let's imagine that there are 4 different people that have come to this creek, and they all respond to it differently. So the first person notices on the other side of the creek, they see the hill and they see the meadow and they see where they're going, and they're like, wow, this is going to be great. And they see this destination, and they're so anxious to get there that they just jump into the creek. They jump in, they stumble through it, and the momentum of them going just simply carries them through. And they get to the other side, and they're all wet, and they kind of shake off, and they're just laughing and like, man, I can't believe I just did that. But they just continue on, and they go to the hill, and they have this amazing experience. Then there's a second person. The second person, and maybe some of you are like this, the second person gets to the creek, and they're a little more cautious. Now they see the meadow and the hill that they're going for in the distance, but they're focused on the rocks. I mean, they're starting to think, wait a minute, these look a little slippery, and so they're really cautious, but they still cross the creek. And they almost slip a couple of times, but the bottom line is they get across very cautiously, and they continue on, but they're already focused on that creek that they're going to have to go back through on the way home. And instead of really enjoying the meadow and the hill, they're like, man, I'm going to have to go back through that thing. I might fall, I might slip. And they're thinking about that the whole time and missing out on the experience. The third person, it's sort of a different mindset, right? They want to cross the creek, but they're more fearful. They're much more fearful. They don't really see on the other side of the creek. All they see is the creek, and they focus on the rocks and the moss and how they look real slippery, and they're not sure. They're really fearful, and so they're halfway across, and they kind of hesitate, and they fall into the water, and they immediately get up and go backwards and get out of the creek, and their day's just ruined. They're just so upset that the creek was there and that it ruined their trip, and nobody mentioned that when they were going to go on this trip in the first place. And then there's the fourth person. The fourth person comes to that creek, and they are just pissed. Like they're angry that nature would even put it there, that nobody even told them about it in the first place. They kind of notice that there's maybe some clouds in the distance, and they start to rationalize. You know what? maybe this isn't such a great idea. I don't really want to go anyway. How good could the view really be? And so they come up with tons of excuses, and they just turn around and they're just angry and upset, and they go back. So here's the thing that I want you to think about. Same exact reality, same obstacle, same objective and goal, and same reward at the end of this beautiful view and this on this path, but completely different vision and completely different focus of how they see the reality. There are 4 different versions of reality. And so what's the point of this? The point of this is we're living in some really crazy times in marketplace, and it's probably always the case, but more so than lately, especially with the COVID and things that we've had over the last couple of years. It's unprecedented, right? But the human brain doesn't really handle chaos very well. Like we hate that. We crave order. We want to have certainty, even though deep down, if you really think about it, we need to have some level of uncertainty in our life. And so the question becomes, how are you dealing with your reality? How are you dealing with life? How do you handle the circumstances in your life and your perception? How do you look at things? How do you look at every situation? Are you choosing to look at it a certain way? Do you choose to perceive and handle the situations in a productive way or an unproductive way? Or are you just not even thinking about it? Do you leap across obstacles in your life with energy and focus on what your goal is? Or are you cautious and calculating and you're moving forward, but you just can't help but focus on problems as well? Or are you overthinking and hesitant? Or maybe you're just simply afraid and you retreat. Probably not most people that are listening to this podcast that are trying to grow, but sometimes in our life we do that. The bottom line is this: you can choose how you perceive your reality. I've mentioned this many, many times on the podcast. People go to a football game and they both see the exact same thing happen, but they have a completely different reaction to someone scoring a touchdown. It might be really bad, it might be really good. The bottom line is you can choose how you handle and how you view the situation. Your reality is based on what you choose your reality to be. And the sooner that you can decide this, the better off you'll be. The bottom line is this: you have to decide that you're going to focus on creating your reality. And second, you have to take active steps in it every day. And tomorrow, what I want to do, we're kind of out of time today, I want to finish up some thoughts, and he gave some great strategies and some great tips on how you can deal with this. And we're going to talk a little bit about attitude, because attitude is the lens you look through to view your life and circumstances. It's kind of like attitude is like the aperture of a camera, right? You can focus in and you can narrow down into the problems and be more afraid, or you can focus out. You can change the aperture on a camera to focus out so that you open it up and you see everything around you and you get more perspective. Like Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So those are the thoughts that I have for you today. What I'd like you to do is join me tomorrow. We'll talk about attitude, and we'll talk about the 2 attitudes you need to have: being fearless or fearful, right? And which one are you? And we'll look at that a little bit more. But I hope that today you'll take into account in your life your reality, your perception of reality, and really start to focus in on how you see things and change the way you look at things. That's my message for today. Do me a favor, if it's your first time listening, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And then also share this podcast with at least somebody that you know. We don't do any ads on the show right now, and don't plan to. And so the only way we can really get exposure is for you to share the show. So if you'll share the show, that would mean a lot to me, and I think it'll mean a lot to someone else that might need it in their life. And that's the message for today. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk with you tomorrow.